They say that if you do something for 90 days, it can become a habit. It become an ingrained
Positive or
part.
negative, yeah.
Yeah, positive or negative. That's why I've run into people that all of a sudden you look at them, they look great. They've lost all this weight. Like, what'd you do? I just started every day doing this. I started walking. I started eating, healthy vegetables and all this different shit. Now look at me. 90 days later, I'm all healthy. It can be done. It's just very difficult. And it sort of flies in the face of a lot of people like to harp on free will and determinism, and there is no free will, and these sort of, I think those can be fascinating philosophical debates. But I think as far as like your own life, it could be a massive distraction. This concept that there is no free will, yeah, throw that shit out the window and just fucking get off your lazy ass and get shit done. Because that's like this pontificating of whether or not free will is a real thing. It's not going to fucking help you.
Well, and for me, I mean, I act as if I have free will because I know it's going to get me a better life. And if I don't have free will, it was predetermined that I'm going to act as if I have free will, so I don't lose anything that way either way. So, I mean, I'm just going to pretend like I have free will, maximize it as much as I can. And if it turns out I don't, then I was predetermined to believe that anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I mean, the argument one way or the other that can be proven in each... Well, Sam Harris will be on soon, and I'll have a conversation with him about it because he can go into it from a neuroscientific standpoint.
Yeah.
Because apparently they can determine that you make decisions before you make decisions.
Deep down in the amygdala, like the base of the brain, top of the spine, that impulse is there, and then people make the decision, and they experience the decision up here, but the decision is happening down here. I don't think that means that's inevitable for everyone. That's part of self-knowledge, is learning what your emotional triggers are so that you can make decisions, right? No, you're not just ex post facto rationalizing stuff that you want to do anyway. You learn about yourself, and I think that you can expand free will through self-knowledge. It's what Socrates said at the very beginning of philosophy. The first commandment is know thyself, and that way you can figure out your own cognitive biases, and you can figure out what blocks you and what your prejudices are. And then I think you get choices. But I don't think you get choices just for having a brain. You really have to explore it. Like, you don't know a country just by falling into it, right? You jump out of a plane, land somewhere. You have to explore it. You have to map it. You have to know the terrain. And then you're competent at the country. And I think that free will is pursued through self-knowledge, and that gives you the choice. But so, yeah, if you think you can, you think you can't, you're right. I mean, if you think you have free will or you think you can't, you're kind of right.
Yeah, and that impulse, I would love to know if there's been any studies done on whether or not people ignored that impulse, because there's a lot of impulses that you have that you never act on. Like,
you have a quarter second. Scientifically, you have a quarter second to interrupt an impulse.
How much research has been done on that? Like, how many people were observed, and how many different complicated periods of their life where they've been forced to have weird situations? How many people wanted to strangle somebody and didn't? I mean, how many times?
No, I think most people, given how few strangulations there are in the world, I think most people manage to, slap down the strangle hands. That's really important.
Wouldn't that be like the number one argument against free will, is how few people get strangled?
We've all been there. Oh, we've all been there. Now, what about the days when, do you have the days where you just like, the elephant of inertia sits on your chest and just farts up your nose and you just don't want to get anything done? I mean, do you deal with those? I mean, do you just let them ride? I mean, how do you?
I don't have those days that much.
No?
No, they don't. No. They do, I'm usually sick.
Oh, okay.
It's usually like a health thing. And if I'm sick, I'm pretty good. I've gotten really good at not doing shit when I'm sick, but just drinking liquids and eating healthy foods and relaxing. And I'll go in the isolation tank and meditate. And I'm not a big, I think if there's something wrong, like I'm like, boo, I usually don't do anything. I just usually let everything recover.
You listen to your body, but you basically is saying we need some downtime, we need some recharge time.
Well, that's where my energy comes from, because my mind is usually pretty damn energetic. My mind is always filled with a bunch of different things that I'm trying to accomplish and different things that I'm interested in and pursuing. But if I'm down, usually it's my body.
Right.
Maybe I get that sometimes I worked out too hard. If I'm overtrained, I get exhausted. But I just recover. But I don't discount the mental blockades and the different issues that some folks do have with motivation and with depression, and that whether that depression comes from chemical abuse, abusing substances, or whether it comes from a biological perspective. Cara Santa Maria will be on next week on the 1st, and soon. Next week? Yeah, next Monday, I think. and she's a neuroscientist as well, and she's had issues. The 25th, that's when she's coming on, and she's had issues herself with depression. She's pretty open about it, and she understands it much more from a chemical standpoint, from what's going on inside the mind. And there's a lot going on there that keeps people on that fucking couch. And what's interesting is it doesn't exist in all cultures. And that it may be also the society that we live in, that this is a very unnatural way to live your life. And that the human body is not essentially not designed for sitting in cubicles, sitting in cars, no motion. And they've also shown that exercise has been as effective at mitigating depression as have antidepressants, as have SSRIs. Which I think
physical exercise plus therapy is, your best chance for long-term recovery from the data that I've read with regards to depression.
Yeah, I think people need to get their juices flowing. I think it's so underrated, and it's associated with vanity. It's associated with all sorts of insecurities about your body, that you're trying to pump yourself up, and your ego, but. Put all that out the window. I mean, goddamn it, put a bubble outfit over your head so you don't have to look at your body if you're really tweaking on that. It's not about that. It's about movement. It's about getting all your endorphins flowing. It's about getting your body into a natural state, because the body's natural state is in motion. We're not supposed to be sitting around doing nothing all day. We're supposed to be hunting and gathering, and that's how our body was designed.
And we're not the strongest species, and we don't have the biggest teeth, but one thing that human beings have is like ridiculous physical endurance. Like what I've read is that the ancient hunters, do you know how they used to get their
persistence
prey?
Hunting. Yeah.
You chase that animal until its heart just fucking explodes in its chest, and then you're like, I win, and you drag it back to camp. Like 20 miles of running, and then the zebra's heart just dies, and you get it.
It's also in Africa because it's extremely hot and they don't sweat. Animals sweat from their tongue. That's why a dog has his tongue hanging out when it's hot. Their body doesn't sweat water.
Right.
So they overheat very quickly.
Right.
So they're good for sprints, but they're not good for long endurance runs.
Yeah.
And that's
and we get that, of course, being bipeds, right? I mean, I think I read somewhere that one of the ways that we were able to get our most expensive organ is the brain, right? But one of the reasons we're able to have the brain is because when we were on all fours, more of our back was exposed to sunlight, and so we had to spend more of the water and energy cooling ourselves off. Once we went bipedal, much less sun is hitting the body, so you have more water available to grow the brain, because the brain requires a lot of energy and water. And just really cool things. I love that biological development stuff. I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, that is unbelievably fascinating. The development of the human brain, as opposed to the brains of lower hominids, is one of the biggest mysteries in all of science. There's so many different things have been attributed to what caused the human brain to grow, double in brain size over a period of 2 million years. It's pretty fascinating, but thank God it happened, I guess.
But this conversation would probably be a lot less entertaining if we were just grunting and pounding our foreheads into the microphone.
Not only that, even if it was the same conversation, who the fuck would listen?
True that.
They wouldn't be able to understand.
Yeah, I think there's a huge amount of human potential that's locked up in people's insecurities and inertia. And I really would love to find a way and to just get people to understand how much fun being in motion is, and how much fun exploring and challenging yourself and challenging the world, how much fun it is. But I think that there's just a lot of, negativity, hostility, of course, on the internet, as we were talking about earlier. It's kind of not all over the place, but it's definitely there. And I just wish people could understand that there is very little to be afraid of in life. I mean, other than death, which is going to happen whether you're busy or not.
Well, it's interesting. We're talking about essentially like if we could talk to Robin Williams, if we could pull Robin Williams aside before he committed suicide.